The following half-hour show is a paid political program and is not endorsed by this station, management, or staff.
The following program is sponsored by Excalibur Insurance Management Services.
In 2 days, we have an election coming up. And at the top of the ballot, you will see an election for the office of Justice of the Supreme Court of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, a very important office in this state. This week's guest is the President Judge of the Montgomery County Court of Common Pleas, Carolyn Carluccio, the first ever female President Judge in Montgomery County history. She joins us today as the Republican nominee for that high office, the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania. She won the Republican primary as a moderate, beating a far-right candidate, Patricia McCullough. Her background is impressive. She earned a Bachelor of Arts from Dickinson College and her law degree, a Juris Doctorate, from the Delaware Law School. Upon becoming a lawyer, Judge Carluccio began her legal career as a prosecuting United States attorney in the Justice Department, in charge of criminal prosecutions of large-scale drug dealers, as well as bank robbers and money launderers, as well as other white-collar crimes. Her work in the courtroom earned her recognition and praise from the United States Secret Service, the DEA, and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. After her federal service, Judge Carluccio became the first female chief public defender of Montgomery County, another historical first. In that office, she managed a team of 35 staff as well as attorneys. She has the unique experience in her public service of seeing both sides of the criminal justice system. In 2009, she was elected to the Court of Common Pleas in Montgomery County, where she handled criminal, civil, and family law cases. After her election to the presidency of the Court of Common Pleas, she was also honored to be elected as president of the 2,000-member Montgomery County Bar Association. In addition to being the Republican nominee for Supreme Court of Pennsylvania, Judge Carluccio received the Pennsylvania Bar Association's highest designation, because they rate all officials that are seeking judicial offices. She received the designation, quote, highly recommended, which is the highest designation they have. Judge Carluccio was born and raised in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, and currently lives in Bluebell with her husband, Tom, and together they have 3 adult children. I hope you'll give serious consideration to this office. It is very important and affects the lives of all Pennsylvanians, as we've seen over the last 3 or 4 years. They actually have input on drawing the maps for legislative districts, congressional districts, and it's a very important race, and I hope you will take the time to go and do your duty as citizens and vote in this election. We're glad to bring you Judge Carluccio today.
This is the Volpe Report, a weekly news and political interview show examining the latest local, state, and national issues with Chuck Volpe. Insightful, informative, controversial, the area's premier political talk show, the Volpe Report.
Judge, welcome to the Volpe Report.
Thank you, Chuck. It's always good to be here.
Well, let me tell you what, I thought it appropriate to give you a chance to address the issues. So the first question is, how's the campaign going?
You know, I feel really good. I'm cautiously optimistic. It has not been an easy campaign, but I feel really proud that we've run it in a great way. I've kept the noise out, kept my head high. I've kept from getting dirty. It's been a hard campaign, but I feel really good. I think the people in this Commonwealth are ready for some fresh change and for somebody with high integrity and someone who understands that their role as a judge is to follow the law and uphold our Constitution.
Your campaign has now garnered national attention. I've read stories in various political outlets that are national political magazines. I've seen even Pennsylvania, the bigger papers covering it. And one of the things they're saying is this has become, for Republicans and Democrats, kind of a watershed election relative to what it portends for 2024, in the sense that the battle lines have been drawn by a lot of the top Democratic donors traditionally. In your case, trial lawyers come to mind, some of the big unions and that. And of course, from the Republican side, some of the more conservative things, obviously, various Christian groups and things like that. Also, some of the major for conservative values, things like school choice and other things, are supporting you. So it's really become kind of, at a much larger level, we're seeing for the first time, Judge, and you know I've been around this for a long, long time, we're seeing for the first time in a Supreme Court judicial race, the battle lines being drawn at a much higher, really unprecedented level. Your thoughts on that?
I'm surprised. I'm a little disappointed. I can tell you, as of this morning, I learned the trial lawyers have spent nearly $5.1 million in attacking me. So you have to question. It's all about abortion. That's been the only thing they've attacked me on. They have nothing else. Right. And the reality is, abortion will not be before the Supreme Court. Right. Our law is very clear in the state. It will never appear in front of me. And yet, trial lawyers have spent over $5 million to attack me on that issue, which I can guarantee you is not their issue. So you have to question what's going on here.
Well, that isn't their issue, but obviously they have other issues that concern them, that it's important. They have a friend in the governor's mansion, in Josh Shapiro, and some of the, let's say, stretches that they're going to promote in terms of legislation, I'm sure their view is it will get to the Supreme Court at some point, and they want a rubber stamp. One of the black marks on the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, Judge, and we're going back to when Tom Wolfe shut Pennsylvania down, the check and balance that our founders of this great country 240 years ago or whatever, 230 some years ago, intended was for the court to be the arbiter and the check and balance on executive power. And they took a pass. In fact, not only that, they rubber stamped various things. Your comment on some of what is going on ideologically, and obviously you're going to stay clear of that. Go ahead.
So the bottom line is, when anyone gets to the Supreme Court, it is so important that they approach this job understanding our role is not to write the law. It's not to write things into the law we think belong there. Our role is so important that we understand the law, that we apply the law, and we uphold our Constitution. It's that simple. And what's happened is, over time and more recently, judges have become much more of activists. They feel like there are social issues that they feel like they need to address. And that's where the very foundation of our country is going to be at risk. Once we allow a separate branch of government to interfere with the job of another branch of government, we are now upsetting the foundation of our Commonwealth and our country.
A lot of people feel like the Supreme Court election is for lawyers. People connected to law and things like that. And, like they'll vote in a governor's race, and they know they'll vote in a U.S. Senate race, and they'll vote in a state Senate race, and all that, in a presidential election, in a U.S. Senate race, because they know that outcome affects what they believe, their beliefs, their values, and what laws govern this country. That's why I think it's important for people to know there's a lot at stake in this race that affect them. You don't have to be a lawyer to be involved in what's going on in your race.
Look, the Supreme Court affects anybody. If you vote, if you have a business, if you pay taxes, the Supreme Court impacts you every day. And the other part of this is that Democratic justice didn't side with the Republicans. That Democratic justice sided with the law. And that's what they should all be doing. This is not a Republican and Democratic thing. It's the fact that the Republican justices in our Supreme Court understand their role, and some of the Democrat justices have forgotten what their role is. So I think it's so important to get the message out there, is that the justices are not necessarily Republican and Democrat, although they are justices who understand what the role of a Supreme Court justice is, and those who want to be an activist judge and want to change the social norm or whatever it is.
Yeah. Well, you're dead on, Judge. And look, very honestly, on this show, I think I mentioned in the past, no one was more critical of the Democratic majority of what they did with the 2020 election, what they did when the pandemic hit. The law, like, for example, was pretty clear to me. I did a show on this with legal experts. This was the summer of 2020. The pandemic was still going on, and the law very clearly said, Judge, that a concurrent joint resolution of both houses, Senate and the House of Representatives in the state, can overturn an emergency order of the governor after 90 days. Crystal clear. And guess what? They had a few Democrats join them. It was bipartisan. They passed a joint resolution out of the House and out of the Senate. And our Supreme Court rules that, well, yeah, they can do that, but it still has to go to the governor for signature. The very intent of the legislation would take away the executive power after 90 days. And they said, yeah, but of course he vetoed it. and to the point where, later a federal judge said that was wrong, and then actually, and by the way, that is what led, Judge, to the constitutional amendment, which stripped the governor of his power after 21 days. The people of Pennsylvania spoke loudly that this rubber stamp, instead of being a check and balance, hasn't been. So I don't know if that's been an issue for you, if you're hitting the issue. And again, I don't mean Democrat or Republican. I just mean, like you said, that was a case of following the law, and an activist Democratic Supreme Court, in fact, rubber stamped a Democratic governor's illegal actions. Your comment.
You've said it. I can't say it any better than you said it, honestly.
Well, okay, Judge.
This is what we're fighting against. We want people that understand their role and can separate the three branches of government. And we have lost that. And once we lose that, we lose the very fabric of what we are as a republic. We are a republic. We're a democracy. But we need to maintain that.
Very well. We're going to take a short break now, Judge, and we'll be right back. As my audience knows, I had spent the better part of a half a century as a Democrat, including seeking this Commonwealth's highest office as one. That same audience also knows that several years ago, I left the Democratic Party and became a Republican. I announced this on this network at Fox on my TV show, quoting former President Ronald Reagan, who had himself been a Democrat, a Union chief no less, before becoming a Republican himself, with that famous quip that he had that he didn't leave the Democratic Party. It had left him. I felt the same way. It had seemed that my old party had been taken over by the far-left progressive radicals like the Squad, a small but vocal minority. They were forcing the larger majority of moderate Democrats to accept theories and objectives that were scientifically suspect and factually distorted by virtue signaling concepts like critical race theory in schools, gender ideology in schools, grade schools even, defund the police, shutting down energy production, the Green New Deal, open borders, decriminalizing heroin, cocaine, and other Class I narcotics, and by not prosecuting crime, to name a few. I'd had enough of the tail wagging the dog. And sadly now, with Republican self-destructive behavior writ large, I'm beginning to get the same feeling about my new party. We have a front-runner for president, the former President Donald Trump, who seems to have a much clearer path to prison than the White House, with an excellent field of Republican candidates who could each make a winning case to the American people, with the proper focus being on prime issues like the failed Democratic policies of the Biden administration and the progressive socialists that have hijacked that party being the issue. Instead, the Republicans seem intent on nominating the one person, Trump, who not only may be declared ineligible for the office, but also push all of the Democratic failures off the front page and make the election a referendum on him and the surrounding chaos only he can uniquely deliver. That is a losing argument, folks, for the Republicans. Then there is the dysfunctional far-right House Republicans, the gang that can't shoot straight. The nation has been served up a level of chaos worthy of the food fight scene in the movie Animal House. Not surprisingly, the likely culprit to this mayhem was most probably Donald Trump, whose fingerprints are all over the entire affair, from Matt Gaetz's motion to vacate Kevin McCarthy's speakership to the blackballing of any choice who was not a Trump acolyte. I will now quote from a great article by Hugo Gurdon, editor-in-chief of the Washington Examiner. Gurdon talks about the recent spasm in the Republican House, whose members squabble and detest each other, saying they remind him of another party in history, whose selfish and self-promoting members shattered the perception of unity that political parties generally try to present to the outside world. The party Gurdon is referring to that most resembles today's Republicans was Great Britain's party of the left, its Labour Party. He says that it was Margaret Thatcher's and her Conservative Party's good fortune for her to be elected Prime Minister when the Labour Party was ripping itself to pieces. Thatcher's long tenure and great reign was blessed by an opposition Labour Party that went on a journey of lonely self-destruction for nearly 2 decades. After almost 20 years of inept leadership and pulling itself apart, Labor finally agreed and pulled itself together on choosing their leader, Tony Blair, and regained power after a generation. In other words, you can learn from history or be condemned to repeat it, as the Republicans seem intent on doing. Now I will quote directly from Gurdon. Begin quote. In the United States, the party that goes in for self-immolation is the Republican Party. They are like Labor in Great Britain. They are ripping each other's throats out over personal and ideological pet causes. In failing to choose a Speaker of the House of Representatives, they seem to know only whom they hate and what they refuse to accept, not what or whom they want. They seem distinctly uncomfortable being in the majority and are doing their level best to win back the minority in 2024. It's a contemptible sight, one that produced an unusually clear flash of anger from the GOP's soft-spoken electoral guru, Karl Rove, who spent his career showing Republicans how to win. At the presidential level, Republicans seem to be doing the same thing, passing over their array of competent candidates who'd be odds-on to beat Biden and going instead for Donald Trump, the baggage-laden former president who may be the only plausible nominee with a solid shot at losing to the hapless and unpopular Biden. Do Republicans actually want to win? Question mark. It doesn't look like it. That's a separate question from whether they should win, but it is one they need to ask themselves. End quote. I'll conclude and finally say that I couldn't have said it better, what Gurdon said and other good editorialists around this country have said. The path is clear for Republicans to win. Choose a president, a nominee for president, that can make a winning argument to the American people. The focus on this campaign and the issue should be the failed policies, pick one, of the Democratic administration of the last 4 years. Or the election can be about Donald Trump. If the issue, and if he's the nominee, it will be about Donald Trump. And if he's the issue, that is not a notion, and that's not an issue that is a winnable one for Republicans around this country. It should have been made clear 2 years ago when a Republican red wave crashed on the shore and on the beach because of the intervention of Donald Trump all over the country, especially in Pennsylvania. We had candidates that were good ones for governor. We had a good candidate who's, by the way, running again for U.S. Senator in Dave McCormick. Either one of those candidates could have been and probably would have been winners. And along with that would have brought in a Republican House as well as a Republican Congress majority from Pennsylvania's delegation. Instead, the Democrats prevailed. How much more evidence do you need that Trump cannot win? Welcome back, Judge.
Thank you.
To change now, we talked a little bit about, like it or not, politics plays a role in these things. And until we get to the point, like many states that have a commission, an erudite commission of legal scholars pick our judges, as long as we have to have races, ideology comes up and all the political issues we talked about. But now let's turn our attention to the more scholarly pursuits of the law that you're engaged in. And let's start with, first of all, why you think, based on your credentials and life experience, something motivated you to run for Supreme Court. What inside you made you want to take that step from President of the Court of Common Pleas to Supreme Court?
This was not on my radar, to be honest with you. I was really happy being president judge in Montgomery County. But people did come to me and said, you are what we need right now. And people believed in me. And then I started to believe in myself. And I was a little tired of what I was seeing happening in our Supreme Court and in our appellate courts. And I thought, you know what? I have to be part of the solution. If I'm going to complain, I have no right to complain unless I'm willing to be part of it. And I feel that way about voters, too. You can't complain unless you're willing to get out there and make a difference, get out there and cast your vote. My family has a lot to do with who I am today. I have really strong ties. My dad's the first generation Italian. My mom's Irish. And that's a way of being raised with a lot of good, strong rules and moral values. We were very family oriented, faith oriented, and oriented to do the right thing every time. And I think that is really what got me to this part. I'm now in a place where I feel as if I'm the best qualified person to take on this role. We need justices on our Supreme Court who have the highest integrity, whose integrity has not been questioned. We need justices who understand their role to be impartial and fair to everyone. We need justices who will uphold the law and apply the law and uphold our Constitution, because it's the very fabric of how we've been built. We need justices who are willing to take this on and aren't afraid to make the hard decisions. And we need justices who are not political. We need justices who are not bought by anybody or not in anybody's pocket. And I believe that's the role I fill.
Let people know in Pennsylvania what a Supreme Court justice does will be helpful, I think, to understand how our appellate court works. So, take it from there. How a case starts at the trial level in their court of common pleas, where you're president judge, and then kind of works its way. We have a bifurcated mid-judiciary level. We have it at Commonwealth Court, a high appellate court, and the Superior Court of Pennsylvania as well, and how things eventually get to you. So talk about that.
So it's important to know that the Supreme Court is the highest court in Pennsylvania. It's actually the oldest appellate court in the nation. And there's 7 seats on that Supreme Court. And the way cases get there, they come from the trial level and get appealed up. But the other way is there's a lot of ways to get there. But the reality is the Supreme Court only handles about, give or take, 150 cases a year, which is really not many. It's a court of discretion. So the most important issues facing the people in this Commonwealth get to the Supreme Court. The other thing the Supreme Court does that is equally as important, but you don't hear about, is they have supervisory and advisory authority over all the courts in this Commonwealth. And why that is really important is I have that experience. My opponent does not. As the president judge of the 3rd largest court and busiest court in this Commonwealth, I already have supervisory and advisory authority over my 24 judges, 30 magisterial district judges, all of the treatment courts in our Commonwealth, which are very active and I believe very effective, and over 500 employees. I understand how to administer cases. I understand case flow. I understand how to make policies, how to work within the system, how to change things so that justice is delivered efficiently and effectively and is not delayed. And I think that piece has been really underplayed and is just as important as the cases that we hear.
Now, what issues, not issues that will be before you, of course, Judge, but what things about your participation on the Supreme Court as a justice, what roles do you think you can play in helping mold the court, A, and B, and therefore helping accomplish what goals you have for the citizens of Pennsylvania?
So I think that's twofold. And the first, I've just kind of talked about my supervisory and advisory skills. I think I fit very nicely into that part and appointing people to have responsibility and integrity to the boards and commissions that they're responsible for. And then the other piece of that, of course, is the legal piece. And I think in that regard, because it is, when I win, it will be 4 Democrats and 3 Republicans. I think I have the ability, I like to believe I have the ability to work across the aisle and work with everybody. I've shown that over and over again. My record demonstrates it, that in Republican and Democratic circles, I've not only survived, I have thrived. And I'm able to get people to see things my way. I have a great skill at working with people, and I'd like to take that with me. And I'm not saying I'm going to change minds, but I certainly think that a lot of people can start to work together a little bit in a kinder, gentler way. And that's necessary. I'm not changing my views, but what I'm doing is getting to make sure that people understand the role of a Supreme Court justice.
Well, one of those things, Judge, I think for me, and I've talked with Justice Kevin Brobson when he was running, he was on this show multiple times, to let people know where you stand. And to me, I hate to oversimplify it, but to me it really is a simple thing. And I think it's more of a philosophical question, so you can answer it. There are those that believe in the progressive Democratic side that the United States Constitution and the Pennsylvania Constitution and the Bill of Rights that we enjoy as citizens, that is effectively codified in the Constitution and statutes and the Bill of Rights, that those are things that occurred centuries ago, and that the principles upon which we are founded are therefore malleable. It's a malleable living document that changes with the times. That, well, they didn't understand this then, or they didn't understand that, or the things we're facing now. We're going to kind of change that document and interpret it in a way, honestly, with things that aren't really there. Now, the other side of the coin is that the founders of this great nation we live in, and the Constitution and Bill of Rights and the things they put in, where rights stem from God and their natural rights to individuals. They don't come from government, They come from inalienable rights, right, in the document, and that those things are not malleable. And the government's role is therefore to ensure the pursuit of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and not to be, in a way, dictatorial. Government, in other words, should not determine your rights, is the more conservative view of this. So where do you stand on that? They'll call it you're a textualist if you follow the original documents. Where do you stand on that in terms of your philosophy of how you should interpret the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and the laws that apply to Pennsylvanians?
That's a really easy question. The reality is our Constitution's been there for centuries. It's upheld. It's the fabric that we are built upon, and we need to uphold that Constitution. It's sacred. Now, our government has put aside a method that in the event something is desperately wrong, even the Constitution, not just laws, even the Constitution, but it is not for the judiciary to take that on. That's strictly for the legislature, and that bar is extremely high. So there is a way to do it, but it's not something that our judiciary should even toy with. Our Constitution is there. It's upheld us for a long time, and there's absolutely no reason to touch it.
Right. Well, again, great answer, Judge. And last, we'll get you out because we're down to our last minute or so. As I always do with candidates, Democrat and Republicans, you have a chance to talk to basically our media mark, as you know, Northeast and Central Pennsylvania, goes far west as Williamsport, several million people. And as a trial judge, you've heard your share of closing arguments. I'm sure as a lawyer, I know you made them. As a former federal prosecutor, our voters know about. This is effectively your chance to close to people one last time before in 2 days they'll be voting. So why should they vote for Judge Carolyn Carluccio for Supreme Court?
Well, first and foremost, you got to get out and vote. And this is such an important race. We need to elect a justice who understands their role in government. We need to elect a justice who understands how to be unbiased and fair and to serve justice the way Lady Justice meant it to be served. I reject activism at every level. Please get out there. I can promise the people of this Commonwealth, and certainly the people of your area, which I've been to so many times because I know how important you are, that I will ensure that justice is delivered consistently and in line with those values that have been enshrined in our country for centuries. I thank you, Chuck, for your time and for the people that are listening.
Well, Judge, that's, again, a great closing statement. The jury will now leave and deliberate, and in 2 days we'll have your answer. A Godspeed on your election. On a personal note, Judge, it has truly been a pleasure getting to know you. And one of the great things that happen in politics is in you traveling the state, you're meeting people you never would otherwise have met. I am and my wife fall into that category, and we're the better for having met you and gotten to know you. Godspeed, Judge.
Well, thank you. It's been such a pleasure to get to know everyone. I've loved every minute of this, except for the negative part. But it's been fun. Thank you.
Good
Have
luck,
a great
Judge.
day. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Lieutenant Colonel Joe Albert, U.S. Army retired, and Commander of Coke Conley, American Legion Post 121 of Scranton, inviting all of you to attend our 105th Veterans Day program, Saturday, November 11, 2023 in Scranton. The program will begin 11 a.m. on the Washington Avenue side of the Lackawanna County Courthouse. Please join us as we honor our veterans on the 105th anniversary of Veterans Day. We have a fabulous program this year, including the West Scranton High School Marching Band, vocals by Scranton's Paulette Costa, the Northeast Pennsylvania Marine Corps League Honor Guard, and our keynote Veterans Day speaker, the Honorable Thomas Vanaski, former judge of the 3rd U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals. So come on out next Saturday, November 11th at 11 a.m. in Scranton to honor the men and women who proudly served our country and our armed forces. Enjoy your Sunday today, and remember, next Saturday, November 11th, 11 a.m., Veterans Day 2023.